And so for me, my take is I've never regretted being intentional.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Curiosity Class. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by my new friend, Dusty Breeding. Dusty is an all-around beast, but specifically, he's a beast as it relates to he's a financial coach. He started his own financial coaching practice, and we're going to be diving into all things finances today. So, Dusty, thank you so much for being here, man. I appreciate you.
Hey Jeff, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for asking me to be on.
100%. Thanks for saying yes.
You bet.
Um, so just let's dive right into it, man. So like what is a financial coach and how did you get started as that? Like that's it's a very big buzzword, but like, yeah, how'd you get into that?
That's a great question. The origin of my journey as a financial coach really goes back to my childhood, and I'll make this brief because I'm 40. So there's a lot of years that have transpired since then. But I grew up in a low income community in rural Indiana, and I grew up in a really great family, awesome parents, and really, really great family to grow up in. But they never made much money. My dad worked in warehouses or factories his entire life. And so we grew up at or below the poverty line for my whole life. And so my family often used credit, loans or credit cards to survive. And then I learned that tool or that I would say that practice growing up in that home. And so when I became an adult and went to college, I used credit cards and debt as a way not to just survive, but to thrive in my mind at the time. I used a student loan to buy a Jeep Wrangler, and I used credit cards for anything that I wanted. And so my childhood kind of informed my financial practices as an adult. And then when I met my wife, who is very financially secure and in her mindset, like she likes security and values that. When we got married, we realized this was a big conflict because I was a free spirit, a spender, buy anything, live on credit, and worry about it tomorrow. And she valued stability. And so early on when we started, we did marriage therapy and have done marriage therapy since we got married. And we realized early on, hey, this is a conflict in our relationship. And so we had to go on a journey. So probably within a year of getting married, we read a book, Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover, and we just followed the system. And so we ended up paying off our debt in about 2.5 years, became debt free, and then never looked back. And so from that moment, we've been on a process of mastering our own finances and building wealth, integrated wealth, and helping others do the same. And so that kind of led me into helping other people with their finances.
Dude, that's amazing. I mean, that whole story is amazing, but like I always think it's cool when you're working with someone who's, let's say you want to do a practice of some sort, like to work with someone who's actually done the thing that they're saying that they're telling you to do, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's a really green flag, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you mentioned integrated wealth. Like what does that term mean?
Yeah, great question. And that is something that I'm really passionate about personally. My background is not in finance. I never took a finance class in college, but instead my background is in religion and theology. I have a couple master's degrees in theology, master's of divinity. And so my kind of professional background is in pastoral ministry, working with churches. And something that I found in that work is that often the real struggle for people is in the practical day-to-day life of living. And so helping people clarify their finances is a really important part of I think finding stability and thriving. But also money is simply a tool, right? I always say that money is like having a hammer, and having a bunch of hammers is not really great unless you're building something of meaning and value. And so integrated wealth is making sure that you have enough hammers to build the life that you desire to build, but also having a big purpose and meaning in what you do. So that way you're not just collecting hammers.
Dude, that's awesome. I've never heard the hammer analogy, but I love that. Like you go to someone's house, like, dude, let me show you all my hammers. You're like, okay, like that's
That's right.
weird.
Yeah, no one is really stoked or proud of having a bunch of hammers. But if you go to someone's house and they've built an incredible home, or if they have built an incredible life, like that is inspiring. And that took hammers to do, but it's
Totally.
not the collection of hammers. And so I tell people that I don't really care how much money they have in the bank. And my goal for them is not to necessarily have millions and millions of dollars at retirement, but instead to live a life that when they reach the end of their life, they can look back on and say that it was lived intentionally and it was lived well based on their understanding of what that means.
So is a lot like, let's say, I came to you, I was like, Dusty, like I want to work with you. Would the first like what would be the first question you asked me, or what's the first like how would that first meeting go?
Yeah. Yeah. So I typically walk clients through a program that I've created called WealthWise. And it is a blend of education, just providing financial education, but also helping to clarify what I think wise use of wealth is, which is integrated. And so this is typically 8 sessions. I usually meet with clients to start with for 8 sessions. And the very first thing we do is we don't talk about money. Instead, we talk about the future. We talk about the vision that they desire to have for their life. We talk about their values. We talk about who they want to be a decade from now. And from my perspective, that's really critical to knowing the right financial strategy. You have to have a vision of the house you're going to build before you kind of lay out the schematic or lay out the architectural plan. And so we start big picture. And so I spend a lot of time with people asking them about what they want with their money. What does that life look like? What sort of time freedom or luxuries, like things that they physical things that they want, desire, that's cool too. And so we kind of talk through who they want to be, the life that they want to live. And then from there, that tells me the right way to talk about a good financial strategy. So usually my first couple conversations with clients doesn't include much information about their money or about finances, but instead is pretty big picture.
Hmm. And does it start with like what is the future that you want, and then also like where are you at now? Not from a financial perspective, but like, okay, you want time freedom. What does your time look like now? You
Yeah.
want s- so you're getting kind of baseline levels, like, okay, what do you want? Where are you at?
Almost exactly like that. I use a framework that Dr. Richard Boyatzis created. He is a professor at Case Western Reserve. He spent 5 decades researching how people make sustainable change. So how people become the person that they desire to be.
Hmm.
And the research that he did led him to crafting what he calls intentional change theory. And intentional change theory is essentially, I say it has 5 components. And the first component of intentional change theory is envisioning the ideal. So if anyone wants to change or wants to accomplish something, the first thing you have to do is clarify what it is that you want. So my early conversations with clients, we spend a lot of time envisioning the ideal. What is the dream? What's the vision? What do you want? The second step in the process is measuring the real. It's looking at the reality of today. It's looking at, it could be very specific about what their finances are like. It could be about what their time freedom is like. It could be any sort of measurement, even something like a net worth analysis. So things to kind of look at the reality for today. Then step 3 is making a plan for change. So it's creating a system or a training plan to go from where you're at to where you want to be. And then
Hmm.
step 4 in intentional change theory is doing it. It is the implementing this, putting it into practice, and then adjusting and making changes as necessary along the way. And the fifth component of intentional change theory is community. So something that Dr. Boyatz has found as a research was that having people in your life, having good people in your life was critical to every step of making sustainable, successful change. You need good people helping you build a dream. You need good people helping you understand where you're at today and good people along the way. And so that framework is a little bit of what I say is like the method behind my madness as a financial coach. I use that. We don't talk about it every session, but that's what I'm using to guide my questions and guide our conversation. So that kind of frames how I walk people through my process.
Yeah. Do you and I'm gonna take a guess, or maybe I'll ask as a question, like, do you find that a lot of the work that you do actually you draw from your theological background as opposed to like financial background? Because I would imagine, yeah, I guess let's leave it there.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I'd love to hear your opinion on this as well, because I think for most people, the how of finances is not complex, right?
Right.
Like you could go to ChatGPT and say, how should I save and invest my money to build wealth? And it is going to give you a very simple process. And if you follow that, you would build financial wealth. So my opinion is that for most people, the basics of building wealth are not super complex or hard to access.
Yeah.
The challenge is the personal component. The challenge is the personal motivation, the discipline that's necessary, the conflict with your spouse or partner over the process, the maybe limiting beliefs that you have about who you are or who you are destined to be. Some of those things are the challenge. Would you resonate with that? Is that would you agree with that?
100%. Yeah, it's like what's that quote? If information were the answer, we'd all be billionaires with six packs, right? It's like the everyone knows like okay, I should spend less than I earn and eat salad more. Like
Right.
but it's really it's really hard to do that.
It is so hard to do that, especially when you live in a place like Austin and all the food is great. Or,
Yeah.
my wife and I during COVID, everything was shut down, but restaurants were open and donut shops were open. So we went on this like donut tour of LA for about a year during COVID, where every week we would try a different donut. And that was a case where I knew I shouldn't be doing that, but it was so good. And that probably prevented me from having a six pack at the time.
When how do you think about like because obviously you're an entrepreneurial person,
Mhm.
um, and you're building this business and like you're on this journey. How do you think about the fact that like okay, I want to like inherently with and maybe this is wrong, but this is my maybe a limiting belief. Like inherently with finances, there's like a destination in mind. Like it's always about like I want to get to a certain place. How do you balance? And like I've noticed this in myself. We had a every kind of knows we had a baby 9 months ago, and so I noticed that like for myself, it's really actually hard to relax. It's like really hard to like just be. And like if we're
Mhm.
hanging out and there's family time, I'm always like, do I need to do the dishes? Do I need to do the laundry? Like, what do I need to do? And so
Mhm.
it's really hard for me personally to just like turn off and be. And so like I'm gonna extrapolate that out to like a bigger picture of like, okay, we're on this journey of finances. You get to this destination, but you're in this mode or you've been in this mode of like building, working, trying to get better, improving. Then by the time you get there, it's like, crap, I didn't practice
Mhm.
how to enjoy it, you know? And like, you don't
Mhm.
want to be the person who gets to the, whatever the destination is. And you're like, well, now what, you know?
Mhm.
So how do you, does any of that resonate with you? How do you think about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is a big challenge. And the way I think about that or try to navigate that in my own life is also connected maybe with my theological belief that we can't compartmentalize things. We are integrated beings, and so there will never be a day when we can shut one thing off, right? And we see this in people who retire. The data on retiring and its negative impact to your health and well-being is pretty wild, right? And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know it well enough to cite it here, but there's some pretty scary data that if you just retire and quit working, your life kind of is shortened. Like
Yeah.
and I think that's because meaningful work is a part of what it means to live well. And so I think all of the things that you're doing as a dad, that I'm doing as a dad, also with the 9 month old, they're pretty integrated. And so I think I would be, it's ill advised in my opinion to try to shut things off. Now, I also think that clarifying enough is a component to this. So clarifying how much work is enough, how much free time is enough, how much money in the bank is enough. I'm assuming you're familiar with Prof G, who's a relatively famous podcaster and
Yeah, yeah.
professor at Stern School of Business. He talks about having your number. Now his number is very high. I think his number was like a couple $100 million or something, and it was like, okay, when I hit that number, then I'm done. And but I think there's maybe an element of truth there that we should all have some artificial metrics that tell us we we're hitting a line that that if we pursue this further creates complexity for our life. And I think that's true for money, also true for like other things. Like my wife and I try to have a date night every week, but if we tried to have a date night every night, even though that's a good thing, that might be negatively impacting other areas of our life. And so finding the right balance or integration and recognizing that we can't just close something off is maybe how I would think about that. Does that bring up any thoughts for you?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that's like, but the number thing is interesting, right? Because it's like, okay, let's say you have your number, whatever that
Mhm,
number is. Like I always like to think about, well, what happens if I hit that? Like
mhm.
I hit that on a Tuesday and then I wake up Wednesday, now what? And
Yeah,
like I don't want to I don't know, like that I, I don't know what I do, Because I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier of like I'm not very good at just like actually I do think I'm pretty good at being in the moment, but like it's hard for me. It takes like a while to get to that point, right?
yeah,
Um so I get the number idea and like I do think that's a good thing to strive for, but then I always wonder like what happens after that?
yeah. And that's very much what I do in my coaching practice. So I would say that's what maybe is a little bit different about what I do versus maybe other financial advisors or wealth management folks. My main focus is on thinking through what will you do, and because I think you can and should have a very intentional strategy for reaching that moment. It shouldn't be a shock. It shouldn't be a surprise. You should, with math and the way we can run the numbers, I can essentially, predict when you will hit that number, right? And so it shouldn't surprise us unless someone won the lottery or inherited a bunch of money unexpectedly.
Sure.
But for most people, the math is the math, and so if you keep doing what you're doing, there's some ability to predict how that will go. So it shouldn't be a surprise when we hit that number. And I think that means that we should have a really great strategy for what happens, what's the step, what stops and what starts when you get there,
Yeah. Yeah.
and 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 that's I think that's the way I would think of that. I actually have a great friend who, my best friend, he's so driven. He inspires me. He is like a grind guy. And from our early days in college, I just watched him excel and climb the professional ladder. And the other day we were talking and he's on a path to do really well in his profession. And I asked him, like, what's your goal? Where are you? Where does it stop? You're so
Mhm.
driven. You're gonna win the gold medal in your profession. So what happens then? And his response, I thought, was really wise and humbling. He was saying that he's already, as he's approaching that, he's already making changes in his life to value and prioritize other things that will continue to grow in value and meaning as he hits this arbitrary goal of enough. And I thought that was really
Hmm.
wise that he's, years away, but he's already incrementally making some changes so that when he hits that moment, it's not it's not a surprise.
Yeah.
He's already constructing a life that is still meaningful and matters.
So what does that look like? You don't have to share the specifics of your friend,
Sure.
but like, what does that look like pragmatically in day to day for, someone like me or someone like you?
Yeah, that great question. I In my practice, I use the wheel of life, which is an ancient concept. It's not something I created, and a lot of life coaches and gurus use this. But it's simply a way to look at your life holistically. And so I look at 8 different areas of life, things like your physical well being. I look at things like your relationships. We look at your hobbies and activities. I talk about spirituality, and a variety of different elements that I think make a whole and integrated life. And in my with my work with my clients, I have them give themselves a grade in each of those areas, a very real and honest, how are you doing today in that area? And so when we talk about money, we talk about how the money should be applied to provide incremental growth in the areas that they desire to grow in. For some people, the wheel is really out of line. You'll see someone maybe doing giving themselves an A in finances, but maybe an F in physical health. And so
Yeah.
that can be an indicator that as you are approaching your number, that maybe you really need to direct money and effort and time, your resources, to improving that particular area. So that's just one way that I like to have that conversation. I like to look at other areas of life and say, what does living well look like in those other areas? And then from a financial perspective, how do you direct your savings, your investing, your spending to provide growth in areas that you desire to grow?
Dude, I love that. That's so cool. And do you literally have them fill out the wheel so it's like you can see the like the circles and like where are you lopsided and et cetera?
Absolutely. Yeah, we walk through a process of clarifying the ideal in each of those areas. And then I have them give themselves a grade as to how they're doing today against their ideal. So, for example, if your ideal was to be playing pickleball every Friday and Saturday and hanging out with friends around the fire pit, if that was like your dream for your hobbies and recreation, and you don't do that at all, maybe you're giving yourself an F, right, in that area. And so maybe that means, hey, let's start funneling some money. Let's adjust your budget to include some pickleball money, right?
Okay.
And so it's very much not necessarily what I think they should be doing with their money or with their life, but it's a process of helping them reveal their values, their ideals, and then measuring the reality against what they say they want for their life.
Got it. Got it. Got it. And do you find that most people are maximalists where they're like, well, I just want obviously A's in everything. So like, how do we do that?
Um, No, I don't see that actually. I instead I see uh two things. The first is that I think most people never really think about this intentionally. I think that when I present this concept, it makes sense. Everyone knows that your life is made up of these component parts, but rarely do we sit down and take the time to think about those component parts.
Hmm.
And so I think the first thing that I see is just a realization of wow, this can be intentional. I can be intentional in every area of my life. So I think that's the
Hmm.
first thing that I see. The second thing that I see is a limiting belief that money, if you have an A plus in your finances, that everything else will be good. And so I think that's often unspoken or maybe a something you think but haven't really articulated. And then when we get into it, even for my really high net worth or high income clients, if you are feeling like you are crushing it in finances, when we start talking about this, you realize that maybe there's some other areas of your life that aren't going the way you want them to go. And so I do think that first of all, integrated living is something most people don't think about intentionally. And then
Hmm.
second, I think that often we think money will solve all of the other problems. So if we have more money, then everything else will be fine. Those are the things
Right.
that I think I usually see when I dive into this with people.
Interesting. And so how do you tend to advise them once they realize, okay, maybe I'm great in finances, but the other areas of my life are not where I want them to be?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like we were discussing earlier, that idea of having enough or having a number, I think that is usually something that has to uh, clients have to sit with because money often fires up a sense of security or insecurity or a feeling of the future is unknown, so I should probably have
Hmm.
more. And
Hmm.
so, if that is the mindset, if there's a mindset of like, I always need more money, then that that usually sucks time away from being intentional in the other areas of life. So I think the first kind of step in the process is really sitting with the reality that it is possible to be financially stable and be financially secure. And then it's saying, okay, when I hit that or as I'm approaching that, how can I make sure that my resources are adequately dispersed among the other areas? But I find that if there's financial insecurity, it's really hard to have health and wealth, integrated wealth in the other areas. So if you can't pay your bills, if you are in massive debt, that is most assuredly impacting your relationships. Your
Sure.
spouse is probably feeling some stress, and that's probably manifesting in the relationship. It is most definitely impacting your health, the stress that you're experiencing. It's probably impacting your social
Mm.
relationships or the way you show up with people. And so, what I find is that finances are a really important part to finding peace in other areas as well.
Hmm. That's so interesting. Do you find that, or do you believe that you can achieve, like, there's this, you're firing on all cylinders, right? Like, you're just your wheel of life, you are A pluses in all of it. And that's maintainable, or do you think that that's a little bit of a naive belief?
Well, that's a great question. I think the way I would think through that is, first of all, this is self-report, meaning this
Sure.
is not a scientific method, right? So it is your opinion, right? And objectively, often our opinion matters most because even if everyone else thinks you're doing great, you might not think you're doing great. And
Right.
my wife gives me a hard time about this because you and I connected at CrossFit, and I love working out, and I never feel like I'm strong enough. Like I could always be stronger. So my mindset is like I am not enough there. And she's
Yeah.
always like, "You're lifting all of the plates at the gym. You're fine." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." Right? So
Yeah, for those
so
that can't see you on camera, you're a very buff dude. Like, you're a very big guy.
well, I really enjoy that process, and I approach that as a never enough, and so that is a limiting belief for me that I'm not where I could be, and
Mhm.
so there are some risk in any time you're providing a self assessment, and I see that in both ways. Some of my clients are really down on themselves, and so
Mhm.
as we run the wheel of life, there are probably more F's and D's than I would give them. And then sometimes some of my clients are a little bit too Pollyannish. They're seeing lots of A's, and I'm looking at their situation saying, I don't know, you're in a lot of debt to be giving yourself an A in that area, right?
Sure, sure.
So a component of the process, I think, is is both accepting that this is your perception, but then bringing in, and what I get to do as a coach is I get to bring in some facts and some data that can help them ascertain as to whether or not their belief is a wise belief to hold, right? That's something that I jokingly tell clients is one of my favorite quotes. I think it's Teddy Roosevelt who said, "Comparison is the thief of joy." And
Mhm.
that is true. Comparison is the thief of joy. But comparison does play a role in our conversations. And the example I use is if I were a zebra on the Masai Mara of Tanzania, I wouldn't want to be the last zebra in line, right? The one that's closest to a lion. I don't
Sure.
necessarily need to be the zebra in the front of the pack, but I at least want to be the zebra like in the middle of the pack. So I'm not going to get picked apart by the lion. And so I think that's true for finances as well, that it's not necessarily important to compare and be better than everyone, but you also want to make sure that you are not lying to yourself and saying, I feel great when the situation is not good or not safe or not
Yeah.
sustainable.
Yeah. So how do you, and that all makes total sense. How do you contend with, like, going back to your, like you said, your limiting belief on, like, exercise and fitness, right? Like, I have something similar where it's like, oh, but to me it's like this balance of, oh, I'm not where I want to be, but that actually is what keeps me driven.
Yeah.
which is like for a good habit. So to me, it's like this positive feedback loop. And like, I love myself. Like, I'm a pretty self-loving person. So like, it's not in like a self-deprecating way,
Yeah.
but it's just like, no, like I know I can be better. So I want to improve. How do you balance that with like, yeah, loving yourself and making sure that like, okay, I'm great where I'm at, but I also want to get better because I know I can. Like, how do you wrestle with those two ideas?
Yeah, well, I have a thought, but quickly I'd like to push it back to you. How do you navigate that in your life with your health and fitness and drive, and how have you how has that gone for you?
It's a struggle because like I to me, I love work like for working out as an example, right? Like I try to work out as often as I can, and like it's an expectation I have on myself. And my wife has
Mhm,
been unbelievably supportive. She's like early on in our relationship, we had the conversation of like, hey, what are our like non-negotiables,
mhm,
right? And so for me, it was working out, and so she's been like unbelievably supportive as we've had a baby to be like, go, like do your thing, like go
cool.
get a workout in. And like I'm so appreciative. Um, and so to me, it's like I want to do it because it makes me feel better and like it's an expectation I have of myself. So I do think I can be both. I can be
Mhm,
I need to go do this and I love myself. You know, I
mhm.
don't think those are actually at odds with each other.
Yeah, I fully agree. And a question or two questions that I pose to myself and others is, how's it working out for you, and how's it working out for the people you love?
Hmm.
And those are the most important people to me, that I have a solid sense of self, and that I am caring for and being the person I need to be for the people that I love.
Hmm.
And that is one way that I try to think about having the right amount of drive, and also not allowing that to consume me. So for example, it might be working out for me if I am working so much that I'm making tons of money, and really fulfilling maybe a very professional aspect. But if that's negatively impacting my daughter or my wife, then they get a vote in that as well.
Hmm.
Now, a random person on the street, someone on social media, they don't get a vote with me.
Hmm.
They're not in that circle of people that I'm committed to pleasing, that I'm committed to loving well. And so I think that's one way. My wife and I have regular check-ins in our life. Almost every week, we're talking about how things are going for us as a family. How are we feeling about our work-life integration? How What's on the horizon that we need to be cautious of? And that is something that we do regularly. Actually, early on in our marriage therapy, our therapist Robert gave us a tool. He said, every day, ask yourselves these questions. Ask, what did you like about us today, and what did you not like about us today? And doing that as a discipline gives you the space to be honest. And there have been times in our life and career, in our marriage, where we've said, hey, we're working too much, we need to dial that back. And there have been some times when we've said, I think we've let off the gas a little bit. I think we need to reignite our passion for our work, because we have some goals of radical generosity, or of travel and adventure, or of things that we want to buy and do, that if we were a little more driven, we would be able to live into those more. And so I think it goes both ways. But my take is uh, being being open to the feedback, from honest feedback from yourself and the people that you love.
Got you. Got you. Man, I feel like that what you just said could be an entire podcast episode. We could like unpack just those elements. Like, okay, a couple questions I had. You said work life integration. I imagine that was intentional. I love that. Can you unpack that a little bit more?
Yeah, that to me, I think that reflects my belief that we cannot compartmentalize.
Okay.
Um, and I believe this because numerous books, like the book "The Body Keeps the Score," is an
Hmm.
example of this. That what we do in our bodies, what we do in our mind, impacts us in all areas of our health and all areas of our life. And so the things that I do at work impact who I am at home, and the things that I do at home impact who I am at work. In fact, some friends of ours were invited to be a part of a panel listening to Warren Buffett, among others, speaking, and someone from the crowd asked Warren what his number one piece of financial advice was. Like, what should we do? And his response was to be intentional with who you marry. That the person you
Mm,
marry is the most important financial decision you make. And so to me, that's like a reflection of the fact that we are integrated beings. How can my spouse impact my salary or my wealth? That sounds crazy, right? Until you have a really amazing spouse. My wife's really great, and she is maybe one of the biggest components to any success that I've had. Her support at home, her motivation, her encouragement has helped me be the person that I could be. And vice versa. I imagine if you're in a really difficult relationship that has some negative impact professionally as well, or can. And so
mhm.
I don't think we can compartmentalize. I think that everything is integrated, and so we should approach life with that reality and accept that rather than fight it or try to ignore it.
Yeah, yeah. And so how do you blend that into work life? You just like you can't I guess it's just what you said, like you can't compartmentalize. You can't like try to balance these two things because inherently it's actually the same seesaw. Like there's not this is all part of your life, so you need to incorporate it as such.
That's right. That's right. So, from a work life integration perspective, I think this looks differently for everyone. It looks different for your profession or your industry. But I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make in the education process is actually encouraging people to select a career path based on a title or a possible income or supposed life that you can live in that
Mhm.
profession, rather than encouraging people to shadow people in those roles and see what a day really looks like in that job.
Mhm.
And I think the first path is looking at these metrics that are altogether usually unfulfilling. We know this from data on happiness. Arthur Brooks does a lot of this. He's a professor at Harvard, or was in the past, and had one of the most successful classes on happiness. And so we know that professional success or money doesn't necessarily bring happiness. And so I think I would love for people to think about work life integration, thinking more about what is the life that I live while I have this profession or job, rather than what is my title or how much money do I make. And so
Mhm.
it is recognizing that it is that there's not necessarily a single goal there, that it is integrated. There are lots of things that are impacted by those decisions, and making sure on any given day that you are being aware of that.
Mhm. How do you how do you integrate? I was going to say balance, but how do you integrate like you don't want to be doing something where you're not happy for so many days in a row, right?
Yeah.
Or like not feeling integrated or aligned for so many days in a row. At
Yeah.
the same time, there's like things you have to do as part of life that are inherently not great, like they're not pleasant. So, how do you think about integrating those two things? And how do you know when it's maybe time to make a change or maybe this is a time to push through? How do you think about that?
Such a good question. Such a good question. I'm I'm a firm believer that everything can and should be measured. Early in my CrossFit days, like back in the day, I started like 10 years ago, we had notebooks and we would write everything down. You'd write down every detail of your workout, how many reps you did, the weight you did, so that you could compare and track your growth or decline, right? And I think that's true in this way as well. I think that there is a way to put some sort of measurement on every aspect of our life. And I don't think it needs to be super nerdy. I'm not like actually that great at math. Like I said, I never took a finance class. I Excel spreadsheets are not, I'm not awesome with them. But so I don't think it needs to be, some big schematic, but I think even having some check-ins, like what I do with the wheel of life, and kind of asking, how am I doing in these areas? How much is enough? being mindful of the impact of your work or what you're doing in other areas. So, like you said, everyone has work that they have to do. And so I think asking yourself and reflecting, is the sacrifice worth the reward? And that should be a holistic answer. Is what you are having to go through today worth what you are getting as a trade-off? And then having that question not just with yourself, but the people who you love as well, to allow them to speak some truth into that. That's the way I
Yeah.
would respond to that. What do you have any thoughts, or would you think differently about it?
No, man, I love that. I think it's all it's hard for me, truth be told. Like, it's hard to like know, okay, like at what point. I think you kind of inherently know, or at least I think I know, like with my gut. There's like a gut reaction that I have of like, okay, this is something that is worth it, right?
Mhm.
This is something that's not worth it. Okay, cool. Um, but yeah, for me, it's just like a constant reevaluation. Um, of like basically every day you're like, okay, like is this what if the thing that I'm, like the if today was my last day, would I want to be doing what I'm about to go do?
Sure.
Right. And so
Yeah.
like if you answer, I forget maybe it was Steve Jobs or someone like a very famous entrepreneur, but it was like, if the answer to that question, if you ask yourself that question, if today was my last day on earth, would I want to go do what I'm about to go do? And if the answer to that question is no, too many days in a row, you have to make a change.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that initial question came from.
Yeah. I think that's a great reflection, and it is hard. And But I also think that that's part of what makes life meaningful, is
Hmm.
that there is risk that you could not do it well. So that means there is an ideal for your situation that requires a little bit of effort, and n- nothing that's nothing that's worth anything is easy.
Hmm.
And so I think part of the challenge reflects the magnitude of what's possible. Um, I Years ago, the minimalism movement was really big. I feel like it's kind of calmed down now, but maybe 10 years ago, the podcast The Minimalist, I think they did a documentary, like it was really
Yeah, yeah,
big,
yeah.
and my wife was kind of like really inspired by the minimalist movement. She did like a year of like not buying clothes and things like that. And I think there's some maybe altruistic principles behind that. So I'm not knocking that per se. But my take has been to describe myself as an intentionalist. And that sometimes means being maximal in some areas. So the things that I value or that I feel are important to me or my family, we go big on. We
Mhm,
enjoy it, we spend lavishly. But there's some areas that I don't think are important or we don't enjoy or don't value. And so I intentionally live as a minimalist in that way. And so for me, my take is uh, I've never regretted being intentional. And so, as I'm thinking about building a life, as I'm thinking about working, yes, I could die tomorrow. Um, but if I'm intentional, if I've thought about my plan for the future, that plan probably includes the work that I'm doing. And so even if I spent all day at work today and not holding my daughter, if that was a part of the life that I was intentionally building, I think I would rest at ease knowing that I was at work the last day of my life.
mm,
And I think that comes from a deep sense of confidence in my belief that I have thought intentionally about the life that I'm trying to live. And it includes the components of the things that I have to do today. Even if it was a really bad day at work, right? Like even if it felt like a wasted day, if that is a component to feeding my family, pursuing work that matters to me, I think that's okay.
has there I love that. I love everything you just said. Has there been something recently in your life that you realized, because obviously it sounds like you and your family are extremely intentional.
Mm.
Has there been something that there's like a recent, awakening or being like, "Oh, we need to make a change here because, like,
Mm.
we're so intentional in 99% of our lives, but this 1% is actually kind of huge, and so, like, we need to do." Like, I'm just curious if there's, like, uh, like, for example, for us, like, we're trying to be very intentional what we eat. And then like we go through our fridge, we're like, oh my God, we have these sauces that are full of like all the sugar that we use regularly. Like
Totally.
this is not aligned, right? Like we got to get new sauce, right? That's just a silly example.
No, that's a great example, and I think those are those moments where the cloud from your eyes has been removed, and all of a sudden you see that, and I'm sure you're seeing it in lots of different areas now when you make that decision. It's
Hmm.
kind of like if you buy a new car, you buy like a Forerunner, all of a sudden you start seeing Forerunners everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's a great um, revelation. It's great that those things get brought up for you. In our story, in my story, I 100% would have to say the birth of our daughter reoriented so many things for us and challenged some of our intentional decisions. So we had been married 15 years. We loved life. We traveled a lot and did a lot of meaningful work and or that we felt was really meaningful. And so we just delayed having kids, and then finally we realized, hey, we are not getting younger. Every year we actually get older. And so, unless I want to be like an 80-year-old at my child's high school graduation, we probably need to get after this. And so, we had a baby, and and that reoriented a lot of things, and we are changing up our time. It's reorienting exercise. And so, for example, even in the last couple months, I have shifted from a performance mindset that I had prior to the birth and that I really struggled with after the birth because of sleep schedules, as you know and are probably
Yeah.
experiencing now too. Like everything's out the door. And so physically I haven't felt well, and I was really struggling with that mentally of like I'm not performing. I'm gaining a little weight. I'm doing worse in my workouts. I'm not even going to the gym. And so I went from a
Hmm.
place of performance, and I had to reorient that and say I need to focus on consistency.
Hmm.
Intensity is probably not going to be there for me for a little while. And
Yep.
so even in the last couple of weeks, I've said, I'm just going to show up, and I'm going to choose to let go of how I do or how I feel. And so I'm
Yep.
refocusing, and I'm saying consistency is the goal now. It's not intensity or performance. And so that's a simple example, but I do think even things like the our schedule has changed, and what we do, where we hang out, all of that has been reoriented in that way.
Yeah. Dude, I love that. I feel like every parent is just nodding their heads as you were speaking.
For
Like
sure, for sure.
it's very real.
Yeah, all of
Um,
my friends who had babies years ago are kind of laughing at me now, saying like, oh, I remember when you know tried to get us to do a 6 a.m. workout and I didn't come. Like now you know, and it's like, yeah, now I know, now I know.
like I'm so sorry.
Yeah, yep, for sure.
Apologize for my past self.
Yeah.
Um, dude, the other thing that you said that I want to ask you about is you said radical generosity.
Mm,
That those are two of the most beautiful words ever. What does
mm.
that mean? Unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. Something that we see in media is what people would call like flexing, right? So if you see fancy cars, big houses, social media is a world filled with flexing. And I would say there's like a maybe a very unhealthy angle of that. There was a Vice documentary that I watched years ago about people renting, expensive cars for 1 day a month and showing up and acting like it was one they own just to impress people, and then they couldn't see those people for another month because they couldn't afford to rent it again, right? And so I think there's like maybe a very unhealthy angle to that, and then to some extent there's like a professional angle to that. As a business owner, you want to present yourself as doing well. You want to convey an image of confidence and success in any business that you're running. So I think flexing runs the gamut, but something that I think is a very interesting and unexpected flex is radical generosity. And no one is radically generous for the flex. But the reality is if you feel that you have enough, if you feel like you are so okay that things are you have so much maybe trust in your stability, or from a religious or theological component, trust in the sustenance that you that you'll be cared for. If you have that level of confidence, so much so that you're allowed to give of your resources, to like actually give away your time or your money to someone else in need, to me that is such a powerful flex. And no one does
Hmm.
it for the flex, but it is like, wow, that is living well, that you have you found holistic integrated success to the extent that you can so radically help others in their situation in life. To me, that is maybe the pinnacle of integrated wealth. Now, I also believe that that should be a part of the daily process. However much money you have, or however much free time you have, that it's part of who we should be. And I think of that as also being like a key path to happiness and contentedness, that we hold things with an open palm rather than
Uh-huh.
grasping onto them.
Uh-huh.
Years ago, I always tell the story. Years ago, my wife and I visited the catacombs of Paris, and that, I think, changed my life, changed our life, because I walked among the skeletal remains of over 6 or 7 million people. And it was a reminder, I will be bones someday. I will be, my physical flesh will no longer exist. And so it really challenged me to think, like, okay, what does it mean to live well, considering the path of humans is physical death? And so that's when I really launched my coaching practice. I launched my coaching practice, named it the Skull and Bone Society, to help
Oh,
people live
whoa.
with the end in mind, to think about living from an integrated perspective.
Wow. I didn't realize that was the naming kit, or that was the
Yep.
origin story of the name.
Yeah. Yep. That's where
Dude,
it comes
that's
from.
wild.
Yep.
I also didn't realize that the catacombs of Paris held that many people. I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, it's a crazy story of as the cemeteries were filling up, the city was growing and expanding. They realized that they needed to actually dig up the remains of people and put them somewhere. And there were a bunch of tunnels. Today, there's something like 200 miles of tunnels underneath the city of Paris that was created by limestone mining. And so they just started filling these tunnels with the remains of people. And now it's a bit of a tourist attraction, for lack of a better term, but you can go and
Sure.
you can only walk among like a mile or two of the tunnels with the remains. But yeah,
Wow.
it's a memento mori. It's a reminder of our mortality, for sure.
Yeah. 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 What did you say? Memento mori?
Memento mori. Yeah. The Latin phrase for remember that you are mortal. Remember you will
Mm.
die.
Oh, I love that. And not in like a morbid way, but I think that actually makes you live a lot better.
That's the thesis of all of my work, is that reflecting on our impermanence, our physical impermanence, is the key to joy, contentedness, living well. And I think that connects with that radical generosity of saying, like I have more than I need, and I can help others with it.
Hmm. Yeah. And so going back, obviously, as we've talked about throughout the conversation, you're an extremely intentional person. What does what do you consume? So like it could be, are you do you read? Do you listen to podcasts? I know you mentioned Prof G. So like, who do you allow in? Because I think
Yeah.
that's a really interesting question, especially in 2026. Like, what stuff do you allow in?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Jim Rohn was an old like leadership guru back in the day, maybe the 80s or 70s. I don't even remember
Didn't
now,
he
but
coach
he
like
was,
Tony Robbins?
yeah,
Is that
yeah,
him?
like yeah, back, yeah, yeah. So that he had a quote that you are the average of your five closest friends. And so I think in modern times, our our five closest friends are sometimes there are media inputs. They're the podcasts we listen to, the books we read, the YouTube channels we follow, in addition to the physical people that we talk with. And so
Hmm.
I try to be really mindful of that. And I do a couple things. I love listening to podcasts. I rarely listen to music. So if you get in my car, we're probably not playing music. It's probably a podcast. I grew up as a financial coach listening to the Dave Ramsey show.
Okay.
15 years ago, I listened to that every day. I listened to all of the episodes, and that was really inspiring to me. Now I listen to Everyday Wealth, which is a segment of the Ramsey Show. It's kind of curated for, it's Everyday Millionaires, I think is the name of it. And that's what I listen to because it's a little more curated for people in a higher financial situation. So listen to that. I also I love some of the classics like Diary of a CEO, some of those things that a lot of people listen to. So I listen to a lot of podcasts. Something else that I do intentionally, I'm a part of a men's Bible study on 7 a.m. on Wednesdays, and I am probably
Cool.
the youngest person there by about 20 years. So I get to
Okay.
sit at the feet of some wiser, older dudes. One of the gentlemen in the group is 93 years old, and just sitting with someone who has been around for almost 100 years, there's a level of wisdom that I very selfishly take. I'm there as a receiver more than a contributor. I don't know that a 40-year-old has much to add to conversation when you're sitting among 70, 80, and 90-year-olds. So I show up and I learn and listen. And so I try to be intentional with that. And then I have a few close friends. I have some really great friends who help keep me accountable, help encourage me. I have friends who will call me out on things, and I have friends who I can call and say, "Hey, I'm struggling, and I need your support." And so those are a few of the resources that I look to. I also try to read a lot. I try to read books and um, from a variety of different angles, everything from theology to personal finance and wealth.
Nice, man. Are there any books recently that you'd recommend that had a big impact?
Yeah, yeah. I recently read Die with Zero. I don't. Have you read Die with Zero?
I haven't, but I've heard of it.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. It's a popular book right now, and I think it's a great book. I think it's a book that you shouldn't just read half of, because you might go sell everything you own and give it all away. But the author does a good job of saying like there is a way to die with zero, not hit zero before you die, right?
Y-
Like not
Got it.
irrationally spend. And kind of the thesis is spend your money while you're living. And spending your
Hmm.
money can also mean itemizing it and prioritizing it for generosity or naming it in your will or giving it. But the idea is like don't let your will be revealed at the end and make all of your financial decisions known. Instead, like you do it. Enjoy the process of giving generously, enjoy the process of spending intentionally, enjoy the process of caring for adult children, all of those things. So I think it's a good read. That was zero.
I love that. I love that. Have you and your wife talked about like how you want to leave? Like, what do you want to do in terms of like leaving money for Lulu?
For sure. Yeah. So we are big fans of planning for the future generation. So we super funded her 529.
Hmm.
And so we see that as a tool for her education, but also we're a big fan of and hope that she will receive scholarships. And so even if she doesn't pay a dime, I'm a big fan of military service. I spent some time in the military, and so if she were to join the army and receive free education, that's cool because the 529 can be used by grandchildren. And so we see this as a generational tool, and that's why we went so heavy in it during her first year of birth. And so we are attempting to plan for her financially and both mathematically or from an investment perspective, but also hopefully doing our best to raise her up with good kind of personal principles of living well and financial management. But
Yeah.
from what I hear from older parents, that's easier said than done, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the things that like scares me the most. But I think Warren Buffett said like you want to leave your kids enough that they can do anything, but not enough that they can't do anything. Wait,
Yep.
no. Did I say that right?
Leave them
Or they
enough
have
that they can do anything, but not enough that they have to do nothing, or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, or they
Thank
can
you.
do nothing. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah. That's a cool balance to me. I like that.
I actually have a lot of clients who are uh, high net worth, older people with with adult children, and they are navigating, how do I do this? How do I leave money to the kids? How do I give money to the kids? And so I'm really grateful to be able to sit with them and help them discern the right path. And I see people who've really struggled and maybe have made some mistakes doing it, and then some people who've done it really well. And something
Hmm.
that I see among the people who I think are doing it well, first of all, is intention. They're just being really intentional about it. They're aware of the risk. And so I think that's something I see. I also see limits and limitations and good communication, right? So that would be one of the tips I would have if someone were asking for tips for how do I pass wealth on to my child is communicate about it, right? It shouldn't be secret. It shouldn't be a surprise. If a child is receiving an inheritance at some point, that should be pretty clear. They should know,
Hmm.
and they should be planning for what that could and should look like.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you guys talk about money like at the dinner table, or do you plan to as your kids grow up?
For sure. I grew up in a home that talked about money all the time, even though we didn't have it.
Okay.
It was a stressful conversation at times, right? What bills need to be paid? What credit card do we need to open to be able to pay off the other credit card? So that was my take or my experience. And my wife grew up in a home that was just pretty quiet about money. They didn't talk much about it, and so there were a lot of questions that she had. And so we desire to build our own path, and that would be talk about money from a very healthy, age appropriate way so that our children grow up with great knowledge of our financial situation and skills and tools. So my wife and I talk about money regularly. We do our budget together. We do a monthly budget. We've done a monthly budget every month for the last 15 years. We've saved them. We have copies so I can tell you exactly, what we earned and spent 15 years ago. And when we started doing this, it took about 30 minutes because we didn't have very much money and didn't make very much money. Now it's usually several hours on a Saturday where we're running numbers and doing tech stuff. But I always tell people you should spend more time managing your money than you manage money for your boss, right?
Yeah.
Like that something we do in culture is like you go to work and you have to manage a budget and turn in receipts and make sure that you're watching the money for the corporation that you work for. And then
Right.
for some reason we don't spend as much time and effort looking at our own money, and I think it should be the total opposite. Like
Yeah.
you're managing your money should be way more important to you than managing your boss's money.
100%. 100%. Dude, I feel like I could talk to you for hours. Thank you so much I think you have one of the coolest jobs in the world. Like, I think money is really interesting and I love learning about people's financial situations. So I think like when we met and I was like, wait, you get to like see people's budgets. Like that's like, that's so cool. I don't know. It's just insanely interesting to me. So, um,
It's
th-
I consider it to be a sacred space, right? Because money is very personal. It's very private for most people, and it reveals a lot. It reveals your hopes, your dreams, your insecurities, your failures, all of those things. And so I consider these conversations that I get to have to be sacred conversations that I hold with integrity and humility and gratitude that people are willing to let me into that space, and hopefully together we can bring more peace and integrated wealth and success to their life.
dude, that's amazing. That's amazing. Where can people find you if they want to learn more? They want to work with you. They have questions. Where's the best place for them to reach out?
A great place to start is my website, skullandbonesociety.com. You can read around on that site about what I typically do, more about who I am and maybe my approach. And I think that's really important as anyone's working with a financial advisor, a financial coach, or a wealth management expert. Like knowing their values and knowing what drives and motivates their recommendations is really important. And so I would want someone to know who I am and to know when I bring ideas or opinions to our conversation, you should know where I'm coming from. And that should
Hmm.
align with who you want to be. Or else my opinions and ideas might not be the best guidance for you. So I would recommend checking out the website, skullandbonesociety.com. I'm on social media. You can find me, Dusty Breeding, on Instagram. So yeah, any of those ways. And I'm always happy to connect.
Amazing. Amazing, amazing. Well, dude, thank you so much again for doing this, for coming on. I so appreciate you. And um, yeah, I think people should definitely reach out if they have any financial questions.
Cool. Jeff, thanks so much for inviting me. It was great spending some time with you today.
100%, man. Thank you. All
Can't
right.
wait to see you at CrossFit.
Yeah, see you Saturday. Bye, everybody.